Thank you, Michael, and thanks for inviting me back. And thanks for putting me in this slot. You know, you never want to be the speaker between the audience and their drinks. So it's good that they've combined it into one happy hour. My name is Don Guckert. Last summer, or a year ago, 2020, I retired from the University of Iowa as the Associate Vice President for Facilities, where I was there for over 17 years with the goal of keeping the campus running. My last 3 months were charged with shutting it down, which is sort of ironic. Prior to that, I was with the University of Missouri for 16 years as Director of Planning, Design, and Construction. So I've been around the industry a bit, seen a lot of change, but nothing like what's going on now. I'm currently working with APPA, serving APPA, as their Vice President of APPA Advisors. And it's an advisory group that we're just starting up, that we're bringing peer-to-peer help to institutions looking for customized assessments. We do assessments, analysis, provide advice by using our community, folks like you, pulling you in, pulling your expertise in, going out finding subject matter experts and business partners where that will aid the assessments. So it's an interesting thing that's ramped up. We already have 6 clients under contract, and we're rolling along for just being 3 months into this. So, I should mention I also served as APPA's president, and president-elect president and past president. And during my tenure there, this topic of change, and particularly technological change, was at the fore of a lot of what we are doing and the messaging we were trying to make to our members. So I'd like to start this presentation off with a quote that's guided my strategic thinking. And I should mention I come to this presentation as a strategist, not a technologist. And so the goal is to understand what the technology is doing so that we can then, as senior leaders, map out a strategy on how we're going to address the changes that are coming. But Jack Welch said if the rate of change on the outside of your organization or company exceeds the rate on the inside, the end is near. More or less, if you're not spinning faster internally than the world's spinning around you, you're going to get swallowed up by it. And nothing is more evident of that than what we've been through the last 19 months or so. But Welch, by the way, I should mention he was the CEO of General Electric, a business icon in his time, but his time was about 25 years ago. And Jack was dealing with more or less a linear change trajectory where the world was changing, but was pretty much following a linear path, which we can get our head around. What we're finding now where we're at is in an age of accelerations, and it's an exponential change. The forces that are driving us forward are driving us at an exponential rate, meaning that we can go along for some time not even feeling change is coming, and before we know it, it's disrupting us. Because as we all now know about exponential change with the pandemic, it's a doubling effect for every time increment. So before you know it, it's beyond you, and you're swallowed up for it. So even when the change feels like it's pretty far in the rearview mirror, it's not too far off when it's actually come in and disrupted your organization. So add to that Welch was in the middle of the 3rd Industrial Revolution. We're at the beginning of the 4th Industrial Revolution. So not only is change happening at an accelerated rate and happening exponentially, we're in a point of turning our economy over to a whole new industrial revolution. And to understand why it's the 4th, to understand the first 3, the first was the steam power industrial revolution several hundred years ago that gave way to the electrical revolution, mass production, assembly lines. And Industry 3.0, about 50 years ago, was the age of the computers. Program logic, robotics, and electronics in the birth of the internet. And now we're entering Industry 4.0, which is cyber physical systems, the Internet of Things, big data, artificial intelligence, all these things that we're going to talk about here in my presentation. Also notice that exponential graph that's suggesting that the first industrial revolutions were rolling along pretty much, in the early, if not linear, in the early stages of change or exponential change over hundreds of years. But what we can expect now is things that happen at pretty much lightning speed. Add to that, as if we weren't moving along quick enough, we threw this accelerant on it, which we've heard other speakers talk about, and that's COVID-19. And Scott Galloway, professor of marketing at NYU, a pretty prominent voice out there, actually wrote a book called Post-COVID, which has some really interesting chapters about his predictions about higher ed. But he says, he reflects, well, a lot of things won't change as much as they will accelerate. While other crises reshape the future, COVID-19 is just making the future happen faster. And so look around. If you would ask Zoom what their market share would be 2 years out this year, they would nowhere be where they're at. If you ask Netflix where they would be, Amazon, we accelerated these companies into the future. Companies that were on the decline, retail outlets in particular, were accelerated in their demise. Probably the most interesting thing is ourselves. If we tried to get faculty together 2 years ago and said, let's talk about going online with a hybrid learning model, let's get that meeting scheduled and get on it right away, we'd still be waiting for that meeting to be scheduled. But we were forced into it. We realized, the good news in higher ed, we realized we can actually change. You know, we used to think we would never change because we're just a slow-moving dinosaur. But actually, COVID made us realize that we can change it. We got to our future faster, probably as much as 5 or 10 years earlier than we would have on a normal trajectory. So we're accelerating into the future to boot, as if there wasn't enough change. So let's take a look at what this future looks like. What does the third industrial revolution look like actually now? So let's take a look at this video and talk about it on the other side.
We spend 90% of our lives in buildings. Shouldn't they be perfect places to live, learn, heal, grow, or innovate? Buildings can be smart, like driverless cars, planes that fly themselves, or our smartphones that control home lighting, heating, and security systems. But will a building continually run analytics to detect equipment failures before they happen? Or anticipate security needs based on trends and predictive movements of its occupants? Or create smart spaces where shades adjust when the sun is shining directly in the windows? Today, buildings produce thousands upon thousands of data points each day, which literally creates a pool full of data. But in fact, the most important and useful data would fill only a cup. Just have to know which cup is most important. Tomorrow's buildings will be autonomous. They will always be learning, always be awake 24/7. Days, nights, holidays, and weekends. They will continuously adjust based on the current environment and requirements. And autonomous buildings will let your occupants focus on what they are passionate about. Just watch what your building might uncover using deep machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Interesting. The power this fan is using seems a little high. We may be using electricity we don't need. Confirmed. The power consumption has been increasing steadily recently. Checking the environment. The supply temperature and static pressure are within acceptable range of set point. Fan output is at 76%. All appears to be normal, but the fan output is definitely higher than usual. Checking service records. 10 months ago, the fan belt was tightened. Here is the part number and life expectancy. I see it was last replaced 5.5 years ago, and have identified the runtime of the air handler. Based on this intelligence, the belt has exceeded the normal runtime, and is probably slipping. This is serious. The fan is in one of our most critical building spaces, and any downtime will cost us much more than the price of the belt. There is not a belt in our inventory. Ordering replacement. And I have notified our facility engineering department with all the necessary intelligence.
As you can see, autonomous buildings learn, and the more they learn, the more autonomous they become, changing from strictly a cost to an asset. This will allow building owners and their staff to spend less time and resources running buildings and more time on what's important, the occupants. Siemens can help you create the perfect place.
Good night.
Siemens.
So this technology is not into the future, it's here now. And it's really a question of the adoption curve that we should pursue in bringing this to our campus. And fault detection and diagnostics is really the first commercial viable solutions that we're seeing implemented at many universities, including my former institution of Iowa, which has 70% of its general education fund space now being monitored with its big data tool called fault detection and diagnostics. Not going to get into that, but realize that there are several universities that are already on this path. But quickly, we'll talk about the fourth industrial revolution. It's big data driven. When you think of big data, think of capacity, the capacity to process large amounts of data. Moore's Law, the doubling of processing speed every 2 years has been happening for 50 years. On the data capture and storage, we've gone from a zettabyte to 40 zettabytes in the last 10 years. And then there's the Internet of Things enabled, where we talk about the variety of things, the number of things that are connected to the internet. And that's gone from 5 billion to 50 billion in the last 10 years. And again, on an exponential curve upwards. And when you think of IoT, think of sensors. Sensors are on everything. Anything that can be sensed is being sensed. And that data is being captured and brought in. Now, you remember from the video, there's a big ton of data in there, and knowing what is the relevant data to utilize is key. Couldn't agree with that more. This revolution is AI elevated, and the machine learning that you just saw in the video, and the ability to build in the algorithms and the knowledge graph that it takes for us to build in that machine learning over time. And as the systems get more and more runtime behind them, they learn more and more about how to predict failure and what solutions, as you saw in the video, to implement. So I want to run through that quickly because these three technologies are pretty much there. The next two will really have an impact on us over the next 10 years. 5G fueled, we think of 5G, we hear of 5G, we hear it in the context of phones. But when you think of 5G, think of instant data. And 5G is going to fuel a revolution in edge computing, which is bringing the computer power from basically the cloud into the building and doing a lot of that processes and data crunching and data analytics and response and all that instantaneously. And this gives you some sense of how the speeds go from each generation. And it wasn't too long ago that we were on 3G, and our world was a lot different than what we're seeing now with all the apps and use of the internet that we're getting out of our smartphones. But look at this difference from 4 to 5G. And another way to think of it is if 4G is a 3-lane highway with a 70-mile-an-hour speed limit and 7 car lanes of safe travel, and each car is a data packet, think of 5G as a 10-lane highway, 200 miles an hour with 6 inches between cars. It's just not speed, it's volume going through the pipeline, so to speak. So it's going to be a real game changer and has the promise of a lot of innovations in our built environment that we are yet to even dream about. But realize it's going to be, when we look at it at the end of this decade, we're going to realize the impact that it had on us. The other technology is blockchain, and this revolution will be blockchain secured. And meaning that it will bring trust into the transactions that we have. It'll just completely change the way economies run. And Bitcoin is what we're hearing a lot about, but Bitcoin is just an application on the technology. It's the technology itself that's going to be a major game changer. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about how that is going to change one of our megatrends. But you can see how often trust is related to here. A couple comments about this. Quotes, I should say. The internet wasn't designed for transactions. It was designed for email and communications, yet we have tried to force transactions onto it. And how many passwords do we have to have? How many identities do we have to verify? And so on and so forth. That gets wiped away with blockchain technology. What the internet did for communications, blockchain will do for trusted transactions. This is Ginny Rometty, recently stepped down as president and CEO of IBM. By the way, George Gilder has been termed America's #1 futurist because of the things that he has predicted. And then Jack Ma is sort of like the Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates of China. He says blockchain technology could change our world even more than people imagine. Bitcoin, however, could just be a bubble. The important thing is blockchain is the game changer. We're hearing about Bitcoin, but it's just the first application, but it's, again, the foundation of trust. So what we do will change. How we will do it will change even more. Think about it. How we will do it will change even more, and these megatrends will speak to that. So the first one should not be too much of a surprise. The move from reactive to predictive maintenance. This curve is what's known as a potential failure curve. It's, if you've ever taken mechanical engineering in college or elsewhere, we learn about that every piece of equipment eventually fails. And it follows a failure curve, meaning that you have these early warning signals that tell you you're going down a path for failure. And at these really early points, we can't detect them. They're such tiny, they're called weak signals in Tom Friedman's book, that we can't pick up on them until we can hear or smell or feel vibration, that sort of thing, further down the curve. But with the technology that we have in place, with the sensing technology, we can pick up on these signals very early, realize that, like the video said, that failure is imminent, plan the replacement rather than waiting for a reactive mode to take care of the problem. So we're going to move from this side of the graph to that side. We're going to pick up on these early signals early on, and fault detection and diagnostics is, again, another tool that's helping us with that. Yeah, the next one is, same graph. This is going to move us from valuing institutional knowledge, I hope I don't have a pushback on that, to valuing shared knowledge, meaning that institutional knowledge in the building rests with the building mechanic that feels a vibration, smells something that doesn't sound right, just is in tune with the building rhythm, so to speak. That's too late in the game into the future. Technology is going to displace that. So we're going to be more in the mode of valuing a systems look at it, bringing different minds together and saying, we have something going on here. Let's look at all the signals, all the sensing, and make a determination on a course of action. Or even further in the future, let's see what artificial intelligence is telling us and then act in partnership with that. So by the end of the decade, and maybe not even that far out, when we lose a building mechanic who has been in that building for 30 years, and we have the technology in place, we're not going to, sad to say, we're not going to miss that building mechanic. Again, because artificial intelligence and this data sensing is going to help us much earlier react to that. The third one speaks to the bottom of the curve, where the cost to repair, the further you go down the line, is a lot more than early on. So this is the financial thinking, that we are basically funding, a big part of our funding in the maintenance world is to fix things that break. And we need to flip that to put that money into investing in the early detection systems, and then doing more of our work on a planned basis. So you can see these changes. This one graph, this one early detection thing can affect 3 megatrends. So from funding repairs to funding detection and analytic systems would be the third one I would offer. Megatrend number 4. Moving from preventative maintenance to condition-based maintenance, the best example I can use is today's automobile, which is basically an augmented technology solution, augmented intelligence. And we're heading towards artificial intelligence, driverless cars. But right now we have operational condition-based, we have condition-based operation, which the car tells us we're drifting out of the lane, we're coming up on the next car too quickly, and so on and so forth. But one of the things that we have in the dashboard is in today's cars is something that's telling us when the oil needs changed. And it's monitoring the condition of the oil in the car in real time, and it's personalizing it in that it's monitoring it based on my driving habits, where I live, do I do highway, do I do city, so on and so forth. And this was a real paradigm shift for me when I first got when I got my latest car. I was looking at when the oil needed change, and was much longer than what I was used to. I was used to taking the car in for an oil change every 6 months or 3,000 miles, whichever came first. Basically, I was on a preventative maintenance schedule. This thing was taking me further and further out, because it was saying, your oil's good. You're good, you don't need to come in. And so it moved me in my vehicle, my relationship with the vehicle, from a PM to a condition-based maintenance way of thinking. So think about how that would affect our building operation, how much PM work we could save in time as we get into more of the condition-based maintenance, where monitoring the pressure drops, the filters, the fan belt, as we saw in the video, and so on and so forth. Much more cost-effective. We could deploy our resources into a planned maintenance model rather than even the PM models that are best practices today. Megatrend number 5 is a move from recommissioning to continuous commissioning. This is a graph by Microsoft. Microsoft was the facilities organization of Microsoft was one of the first advocates of fault detection and diagnostics. We partnered with them in 2014. They held our hand while we went through a pilot project at the University of Iowa. And so they this is one of their points and benefits of FDD is that once you get a system tuned and you put the fault detection and diagnostics into place, then you can monitor the condition of that operation. And anytime you start down that failure curve or something is getting out of the performance standard, you take action and you keep the system or the building operation performing at optimal level. So you never have to go back and recommission because you're incrementally keeping it on optimal operation. Further, they go further to say that you actually, because of the system's view of it, you can find opportunities to actually elevate the performance of the building. Because the building was engineered originally, when it was designed and built, wasn't perfect. And through this, again, this technology, you can find over time ways to improve the performance of the building. Number 6, moving from a mindset of worrying about competing with this machine to complementing it. Artificial intelligence is not the enemy. Machine learning is not the enemy. It's the partner that's being developed as we go through. I was trying to draw an analogy. Is it Captain Kirk and Spock? Is that the analogy here? Is it Star Wars and R2-D2? But it's partnership that you have with artificial intelligence that will move us to a new industrial revolution. It'll eliminate jobs in some sense, but it will create more. With each industrial revolution, more jobs have come out of it than have been lost. And not the same jobs. It depends if that's your job that's being lost or not. But there's nothing to fear about the revolution that we're getting into. Just realize it's going to take us to a different place. Now, the best way to think about it is not to compete with the machine, is to complement it and to become more human. Do what the machine can't do. The machine can't be curious. It can't be creative. It can't be collaborative. It doesn't have integrity. It doesn't exercise judgment. These are all the things that we bring to the partnership, so to speak, with artificial intelligence. So that's why we're seeing, and we've heard some earlier speakers talk about soft skills development being more and more important. Couldn't agree more. In fact, the shelf life of technical skills is limited. The shelf life of soft skills is forever, in a way, unless you're changing your view of the world and all that, become jaded or whatever. But the point being, soft skills are for a career, and technical skills are more transient. And why compete with a machine that can understand the complete body of written history, as an example? Understand every maintenance manual, operational manual that's ever been printed in a matter of a short amount of time. So yeah, go from competing with the machine to complementing it with these soft skills that we can bring, these human skills that we can bring to the table, which gets us to Megatrend number 7. To move our thinking from rewarding expertise to rewarding collaboration. I'd much rather have a team working together and trying to solve a problem than rely on an expert who won't share their knowledge. There was some talk last night by Kim about the transfer of institutional knowledge and all that. Well, if you are in a shared knowledge environment, you're continually learning and growing and being prepared for transition, for succession planning. It's built in to that type of model where we're sharing. And then, quite frankly, it's one of the things that concerns me. I'm no longer an active practitioner like you all, but in this world of remote work, where's collaboration fit into that? How is it done? Is it the same as in-place collaboration? So, Megatrend number 7. Number 8, now we'll get interesting. From managing facilities to managing occupant experiences. We heard Mike Richter today. We heard an earlier speaker this morning talk about the occupant being the important thing, not the facilities. The video even says this. Remember, they almost ended with this: spend less time, resources on running buildings and more time on what's important, the occupant. And again, COVID's another thing that's taken us into the future quicker. People need a reason to come to campus. And it better be pretty damn good, and better be, heighten the experience they're going to get by coming. Otherwise, it's not going to be as comfortable as they are in their home. Might not be, the lighting might be better at home. The control over the temperature is better at home, so on and so forth. There's got to be really good reasons why folks should come to campus and occupy our spaces. So we need to shift our thinking to talk about the occupant, the student experience as an example. And now that we have that seat at the table, that's why we need to be changing our orientation to be thinking about the experience that our faculty, our staff, and our students and our visitors have when they come to our campus. So that gets to the point, if we're going to be more focused on the occupant experience than we are the actual facilities, that would bring us to Megatrend number 9. From owning physical assets to ensuring system performance. There is, I will say in 10 years, maybe sooner, there's no reason why we should own any of us should own this in higher ed. A carrier chiller as an example. No reason. Carrier will be, as an example, a better position to understand the operation performance, the data analytics, the artificial intelligence, do the things that we were seeing in that video than we ever could be. At Iowa, we may have a half a dozen carrier chillers at best. The corporation has over 300,000. I talked to Ed Bonessi. Ed, are you in here? Yeah, you validated what I wanted to test, is this really a good model? What we want is conditioned air. We don't need the chiller into the future. We want the conditioned air. So why have the challenge of operating a piece of equipment less optimally than carrier could? And just not a chiller. Let's talk about fire alarm systems, air handler systems, card access and security, elevators. It doesn't matter what it is. These corporations or system integration type of companies will be in a much better place to get the most out of the operation, maintenance, so on of these systems, and we'll get the benefit of providing an occupant experience by making sure that they are performing to the outcomes that we contracted them for, which brings back blockchain. This is not possible today because we don't, and perhaps the next speakers can talk about that, we don't trust letting people into our systems, through our firewall to look at this equipment. We don't trust that if we had a performance contract that they would actually we would be able to hold them to it. But blockchain will have the effect of us having more trust in that relationship, more ability, more efficiency, lower costs to be able to get to this world. And not to mention, there could be a tax benefit in this. If a company if a company operates a piece of equipment for an institution long enough, they could take a tax benefit, a depreciation benefit from it. So there's a lot of things that could change how we look and think about our facilities into the future. Last one, from leading top down to leading bottom up and outside in. I struggle with this one because I like to think that we will be leading it as senior officers. I think the generation that's coming in is going to drive us into this fourth industrial revolution, and I think the business partners from the outside are going to bring it to us, or a board member who is in real estate, where all this stuff, look at the real estate market, it's a bellwether for what we're going to see. We'll have a conversation with the president, and the president will ask us to implement their solution into our environment. There's nothing wrong with bottom up and outside in my opinion, as long as we as senior officers have laid out the strategy, have invited the discussion, have a plan, have presented it to our administration that we need to prepare. And preparing could just be the first step of a digital infrastructure. Trying to retire some of our analog systems, be prepared for the next decade. It doesn't have to be jump into AI tomorrow like we were seeing in the video. And it was, when I spoke here 2 years ago, there were 20 comments that I put on the board of what was on your mind as an audience. And it was 20 technological-oriented comments. And I looked through the book this time around, there's none. I know why. There's a lot of things on your mind. There's a lot of things going on. But I'm here to encourage you to be thinking about this change coming, even though you're up to your ears in a lot of other stuff that's going on. I believe that at the end of the decade, many of you in this room will hold this title or be reporting to this title. We're going to be shifting from facilities officers to chief operations technology officers. This is the counterpart to the information technology officer on a campus. There's the operation, OT/IT. I think Nicole will speak to that next. But not only we're talking about facilities, we're talking about parking, transportation, student movement, all kinds of things that are going on operationally on the campus that would be part of this new fourth industrial revolution. So finally, these are, again, a summary of the 10 megatrends. And just a couple more things to say that, again, we may feel like we're right here, that this technology is behind us. We've got time. It's not going to be a disruptor for us, but pretty soon we're going to be there. And we're going to be there like that. It flips that quickly because of the way exponential change hits us. So the last bit of advice to close out, I will we'll have Bill Gates give and say, we always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. Don't let yourself be lulled into inaction. So I'm here really to encourage you to take the first steps towards understanding this world and thinking about how you want to prepare yourself for the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Don.